The London season was a meticulously polished facade. Lady Eleanor Ashworth was its most unwilling, yet perfect, decoration. She moved through the glittering ballrooms of Mayfair like a porcelain figurine, beautiful, cold, and utterly confined to her pedestal. Every glance, every curtsy, every murmured compliment was a thread in the suffocating web of expectation woven by her mother, the formidable Duchess. Eleanor was officially engaged, the climax of her social campaign having been achieved with clinical precision. Her intended was Lord Harrington, a man as steady, reliable, and fundamentally dull as a well-kept ledger book. He represented stability, title, and most importantly, the necessary financial security for her family's precarious estate. She knew he did not love her, and she certainly did not love him. They merely respected the utility of their arrangement. One stifling evening at the Duke of Devonshire's masque, Eleanor retreated to the observatory, seeking silence among the silent, indifferent stars. The air there was cool, smelling faintly of old books and dust, a welcome respite from the cloying perfume of the crowd below. She was not alone. A man stood by the massive brass telescope, his back to her, silhouetted against the dark glass. He was not wearing the required mask, and his attire was that of a respectable gentleman, yet lacking the excessive frippery of the typical noble. "Are you escaping the noise, or attempting to locate a less demanding planet?" he inquired, his voice low and utterly devoid of London's customary affected drawl. Eleanor stiffened. She was not used to such direct, unvarnished communication. "Both, sir. Though I suspect the moon is equally burdened by expectation." He turned then, and she saw his face, strong-featured, framed by slightly messy dark hair, and eyes that held an unsettling, intelligent intensity. "Mr. Julian Devereux," he said simply, offering a slight non-traditional bow. "I am an engineer, Lady Eleanor. I specialize in breaking things down to find the truth." The description felt less like an occupation and more like a warning. He was already threatening the carefully maintained structure of her life. Eleanor felt a forbidden flicker of interest, the first genuine emotion she had experienced since her engagement announcement. Over the following weeks, their accidental meetings became deliberate. They met not at balls, but in the shaded corners of the royal gardens, ostensibly discussing the new classification of ferns. They conversed in the hushed, dusty stacks of the library, debating the revolutionary potential of steam power over the stagnant weight of tradition. Julian's world was one of logic, measurable facts, and honest ambition, a stark, exhilarating contrast to the gilded nonsense of her own. He never spoke of her title or her fiancé. He spoke only to her, the woman hidden beneath the satin and diamonds. "Your eyes," he once said, looking directly at her, "hold the weight of 1,000 unsaid paragraphs. What are the first sentences?" The question struck her like a physical blow. No one in her society asked what she thought. They only asked what she intended to purchase. With Lord Harrington, their conversations were predictable, revolving around property lines, parliamentary gossip, and the precise cost of French lace. Harrington was perfectly polite. He was perfectly courteous. He was perfectly forgettable. But Julian remembered the slightest detail of her comments, a stray thought about philosophy, a childhood memory of the sea. One rainy afternoon, they found themselves alone in the conservatory at Kew, the glass dome muffling the sound of the downpour. Julian showed her a delicate, clockwork mechanism. He carried a prototype for an improved engine governor, precise and brilliant. "It regulates the flow," he explained, his fingers tracing the tiny gears. "It prevents the machine from consuming itself through excess speed," Eleanor whispered. "We could all use such a governor, Julian. My life is governed by preventing excess feeling." He stopped turning the gear and looked up, the air between them suddenly charged with a dangerous, unspoken electricity. It was the moment the fragile veneer of polite friendship dissolved, revealing the terrifying, real possibility beneath. He did not touch her, but the intensity of his gaze was more intimate than any embrace. They both understood the precipice they stood upon. "You are more than the sum of your expectations, Eleanor," he said quietly. His words a revolutionary manifesto against her life. The secret meetings became harder to manage. The Duchess was growing suspicious of Eleanor's distracted air and the faint glow in her eyes. Lord Harrington, though dim-witted, was not blind to the change in his fiancée. He observed Julian at a distance with cool, proprietorial disdain. The inevitable confrontation arrived one evening after a concert. Harrington intercepted Eleanor near the carriage drive. "Lady Eleanor," he began, his voice flat and accusing. "Your association with Mr. Devereux is ... unseemly. It is beneath your station." Eleanor felt a surge of genuine anger. "My interests are my own, Lord Harrington. I assure you my honor is intact." "Honor, perhaps," he sneered, "but not propriety. You are my future duchess, not an intellectual curiosity for a mere engineer, his mind." Eleanor retorted, "Holds more brilliance than your entire lineage, sir." Harrington simply smiled, a thin, chilling expression that revealed the true power dynamic. "Perhaps, but his lineage cannot save your father's estate from ruin, can it?" The threat was clear. He knew the extent of her family's debt, the very reason she was marrying him. The following day, a letter arrived from her father, sealed with the family crest. The contents were devastatingly formal. "The debts are pressing, Eleanor. The engagement is broken. The bailiffs will be at the door by Michaelmas. Must hold firm. The weight of her ancestral home, the fate of her parents, the reputation of her entire family all rested on her shoulders." The veneer snapped back into place, thicker and harder than before. Duty was an iron corset, unforgiving and unbreakable. She knew she could not sacrifice her family for a chance at a true but utterly unstable happiness with Julian. She sent a stiff, formal note to Julian, a request for one final meeting, a farewell disguised as a final debate on scientific progress. They met in a secluded wing of the National Gallery, surrounded by portraits of equally miserable-looking, duty-bound aristocrats. Julian was grave. He already sensed the change, the return of the cold perfection in her posture. "I am leaving England, Eleanor," he announced, his gaze unwavering. "My research requires the stability of a warmer climate and the freedom of new ports." The news sliced through her carefully constructed defenses. She had secretly hoped he would offer a reckless escape, a grand, foolish gesture. But Julian was a man of logic, not melodrama. He understood her constraint and was choosing his own freedom over her silent plea. "You must go," she managed, her voice flat. "London society is too confining for a spirit like yours." "And what of your spirit, Lady Eleanor?" he challenged, using her title like a weapon against the wall she had built. She offered him a practiced, dismissive shrug. "Mine is perfectly content where it is. I have chosen stability." He saw the lie, but he respected the barricade. He reached into his pocket and produced a small silver locket. "This is a gyroscope, Eleanor. It always finds balance, regardless of the chaos surrounding it. Keep it." He placed the cool metal into her gloved hand. The exchange was swift, formal, and devastatingly final. "Goodbye, Julian," she whispered, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. "Till the veneer cracks, Eleanor," he replied, and then he was gone, leaving her alone with the silent, judgmental eyes of the painted duchesses. The engagement party a week later was a blur of champagne and lies. Eleanor wore her diamonds like chains. She accepted the congratulations, the well wishes, the empty smiles, a perfect bride for a perfect empty life. Harrington was triumphant, basking in the social approval of his acquisition. He saw her only as the reflection of his own wealth. Eleanor touched the silver gyroscope hidden beneath her gown. It was her only connection to truth. The wedding was set for the spring. The months that followed were a cold, slow descent into the inevitability of her fate. She performed her duties flawlessly. She hosted teas, attended operas, and never once mentioned Julian Devereux. But every night, she would take out the gyroscope, watching the tiny silver ring spin, finding its true north, regardless of how she tilted the casing. One evening, examining the gyroscope under a lamp, she noticed a faint, nearly invisible etching on the silver surface. It wasn't a random pattern. It was a single, tiny Latin phrase, Vera Incinerum, truth in the ashes. It was a coded message referencing the exact text they had been reading the last time they were truly happy in the Kew Gardens. She raced to the garden notes. They had shared a journal disguised as a botanical inventory. The notes revealed a specific, obscure reference to a research facility Julian was desperate to visit, a small, independent lab in Geneva, Switzerland. The message was clear. If she ever broke free, that was where the truth he would be waiting. But how could she break free? Harrington was a man of impeccable reputation. She was bound by law, and the weight of her family's dependence. Then, fate, or perhaps the cosmos, intervened. A minor, but fatal, scandal rocked Harrington's reputation. His cousin, a man he had vouched for, was exposed in a gambling scandal that disgraced the Harrington name just enough. Eleanor saw her chance. She approached her father, not with pleas, but with a cold, calculated argument. "Father, the Harrington name is now tainted. To marry him is to risk the Ashworth name further. We must find a graceful exit." The Duchess fought, but her father, seeing a strategic retreat, finally conceded. The engagement was broken, citing incompatibility of temperament and recent unfortunate associations. The social fallout was brutal. Eleanor had achieved the necessary freedom. Her family was safe, and she was unbound. She sold a small, inherited piece of jewelry, a true personal sacrifice, to secure passage for herself and her loyal maid, disguised as a modest tour of the continent. Her mother wept dramatic tears, but Eleanor was finally free of the Veneer. The journey to Geneva was long, dirty, and exhilarating. She saw the world not through a carriage window, but with her own two eyes. She arrived in the bustling industrial city, the smell of coal and innovation replacing the scent of stale drawing rooms. The Geneva address led her to a narrow workshop, the sounds of hammering and high-pitched steam whistling from within. She stood outside the door, the silver gyroscope clutched in her hand, suddenly terrified. What if he had moved on? She pushed the door open. The air was warm, scented with oil and burning metal. Julian stood over a massive, intricate machine, his brow furrowed in concentration, completely absorbed in his work. He looked up, startled by the presence of a finely dressed woman in his workshop. His expression slowly shifted from curiosity to stunned recognition. The years of duty, the miles of separation, the layers of polite society, all vanished in that single shared gaze. He saw the genuine fierce woman he had once known, now finally free of her gilded prison. He walked toward her, not running, but with the steady measured pace of a man who knew exactly what he was doing. The veneer finally cracked. "Eleanor," he murmured, taking her ungloved hand, feeling the true warmth of her skin. "It took some time, Julian," she replied, a genuine smile, the first in years lighting up her eyes. "But the balance has been found." Thank you for watching this story from Storycraft Studio. If Eleanor and Julian's journey from duty to destiny resonated with you, please like this video, share it with fellow romance enthusiasts, and subscribe to Storycraft Studio channel for more tales.